Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We had someone booked in for Niners Unplugged, but every so often it happens that we have a cancellation. And so we decided, actually, since it was a last-minute cancellation, we just pull out one of my cars and have a chat about it. So it's going to be a bit of a weird one for me because I'm not usually used to talking to the camera. I'm usually used to talking to someone who's much more interesting than I am about their car. So hopefully this is going to be of some interest to our audience. There's a question I often get asked very kindly. I don't know how valid my opinion is on it, but I always say the same thing. So the question in itself is, I've got a car and I want to do this modification, what do you think I should do with this and that, and maybe I should put on the suspension or I should put on these ITBs, whatever it may well be. People kindly ask me what I think that they should do on their car. And my answer is always the same, and it's the approach that I have with my cars, which is that you need to have from the outset, it needs to be defined exactly how you're going to use the car from the outset. Because if you haven't got that fully defined, then you end up building a car or modifying a car that isn't fully thought through. And what I mean by that is you'll end up with something that's a bit of a basket case or a bit of a mongrel. It'll be a half track car, half road car, half weekend car, half race car. I don't know. It'll end up being a master of none. So I think it's really important to decide how you're going to use a car before you really start thinking about the suspension and all the different bits and pieces. So everything works succinctly, I think is the right word. So an example of that is what I did with this specific car. Now, this is a 964, an anniversary edition. Porsche aimed to make 911 of these for the 30th anniversary of the 911. The reality is that it didn't make 911 because they couldn't sell 911. There are theories out there that they had a load of wide bodies left over that were supposed to be turbos, and that's why they decided to do this. I don't think that necessarily is true. What I do know is that 32 of them came to the UK, and 12 of them were in Polar Silver, with the rest of them in Viola. And officially, they were only available in, I think it's Viola, or is it Amethyst Purple? I'm pretty sure it's Viola, actually. And Polar Silver, like this example here. So there were 12 of them that were in Polar Silver, and I believe there are about 8 of them surviving. So this is one of 8 cars. There are unofficially some anniversary editions that came in different colors. So there's the red ones, black ones, I think there's a yellow one, there's a few others that have the traits that make it an anniversary edition. These were available in the rest of the world, so not in America. In America, what you had available were the turbo looks that were basically identical to the anniversary edition, but they didn't have some of the badging, which I'll go through in a little bit later. And there are some turbo looks also in the rest of the world. So if you're thoroughly confused at this point, so am I. But yeah, anyway, so what is an anniversary edition? So as you can see, it's a 964. It's a wide body car, it's a four-wheel drive car, and it's got a naturally aspirated engine. And to that end, what it effectively means is that a wide body car is a heavy car. And a four-wheel drive system is a heavier system. I think they actually, in reality, account for about 75 kilos in weight, and extra weight. Plus, you've got a naturally aspirated engine, not a turbocharged engine. So realistically, you've got a heavy car that is slightly underpowered. So that kind of tells you, the car kind of tells you what it wants to be. It's not going to be a lean, lightweight, alpine assaulter, like, for example, this car over here. This car is a heavier car. It's slightly underpowered. It's got the four-wheel drive system. Really, it's always going to be a cruiser, and it'd be silly to try and make it something else, I think. So that kind of already defines how the car is going to be used. It's going to be used as a cruiser. It's not going to be used as really a lightweight sports car or a track car, because the other side of it also is that whatever you do to the car, I think you want to make reversible because it's such a rare car, you don't want to destroy one of the last 8 of these cars left. So this is kind of an exercise in restraint for me. So for example, the green car over here started off as like a 69 long wheelbase. So this is highly modified with wide arches and all sorts of different metalwork. So it'll never go back to a 69 long wheelbase. But this isn't a rare car. It's not matching numbers. It is a mongrel. So there's artistic license, for want of a more pretentious word, to do whatever you want with the car. Whereas with something like this, because it's a rare car, personally, I wouldn't ever do modifications which are not reversible. So this is an exercise in restraint. So now that I've got it defined as to how I'm going to use the car, it's going to be a cruiser, I can then set about doing the modifications that I think are going to make it better to do that job for me personally. I think cars are mass-produced for a mass market, and that's totally fair enough. But the truth is we're all individuals with individual requirements, and what is a sports car for me or what is a cruiser for me is totally different to what it might be for Tom or for someone else. So I really like the idea of personalizing a car and really making it my own, making it a true reflection of what driving means to me personally. Okay, so cruiser. So trying to think where I want to start with this. In no particular order. So what we've got the standard 3.6 litre engine that develops around 250 horsepower from the factory. It's got a lightweight flywheel and an RS clutch, which are easily replaceable, serviceable items. So again, fully reversible. Other than that, the engine is completely standard. It's still got the air conditioning, which for cruising, as this is a cruiser, as I've decided to define it, is useful to have, as well as the heater matrix as opposed to, the heater motor as opposed to just heat exchangers, which is what I've done on other cars. So it's still got the full fat engine since this is a full fat car. What else? Exhaust-wise, at the moment I'm running the standard exhaust because I did a long trip with my friend Justin last year across into Germany, and I wanted the car to be nice and comfortable and quiet. But otherwise, I've also got a fab-speed exhaust system that I sometimes put on here. It does tend to drone, and that's the reason why I took it off. But it's a dual outlet, and I think it suits the car since the car is now modified and sits well. It's just kind of nice to have those 2 exhaust pipes and have that extra sound. But really, I don't think there are any performance benefits to that fab-speed exhaust because I haven't mapped the car to it. In fact, I think that the car idles and performs better on the standard exhaust, and if this was a car that I was permanently going to modify, then I wouldn't think twice about tuning it. I mean, what I would love to do and what I think would be transformative for a car like this is to do like a 3.8 litre engine, not on ITBs because I don't want the horsepower. What I really want is the torque for a wide car like this, for a heavy car like this. And at the same time, aesthetically, I want this standard intake plenum. I wouldn't want the trumpets and everything. I'd want it to look standard, so a bit of a sleeper. So a 3.8 litre engine would look awesome, but then I would lose quite a bit of the originality in here. So I'm conscious of that, and that's something I haven't done. Watch this space in case I have a moment of madness and decide to do it. But I've got other priorities at the moment. Running gear. So I've got the original suspension on the shelf, so that's come off. I'm now running some Bilstein PSS 10s. I'm a big fan of Bilstein suspension. There are other awesome brands out there like XTC, Nitron, yada yada, the list goes on. And certainly, what's the other brand that I really like? Öhlins are amazing as well. But I wanted something that was relatively simple. This isn't going to be a track car. In effect, actually, the PSS 10s probably are slightly over-spec because I don't need that much adjustability in terms of bound and rebound. What I really wanted to do was just fine-tune the ride height to get it to where I wanted it to sit. And as you can see, it's pretty damn aggressive. The rear control arms I've replaced for narrow body ones, and I've done that for 2 reasons. One, I think it looks sexy as hell because it's basically allowed me to run a very, very deep rear dish, which is reminiscent of the 3.8 RSRs, and that's how they got their deep dish. And just that look, I think, just looks absolutely awesome with just a standard tail, no big tail on the back. The other side of it, benefit of it also, is that the narrow body trailing arms are obviously lighter and they have a lighter unsprung weight. But really, the real reason I really did it was actually because, from a vanity perspective, because I just thought it looked aesthetically really, really pleasing. But I've got the original trailing arms on the shelf. Again, in case the next owner wants to put it back to stock, I certainly don't want to butcher this car into a state where it's irreversible. So the original Cup 1 wheels are also on the shelf in storage, and what I've got here is a set of RH replica Speedline wheels. Really, I would have loved to put on genuine Speedline wheels, but they are very expensive. I already had a set of RHs on the shelf, and also the dishes that come from the original Speedlines are made of aluminium. Whereas here, what I've done is I've spec'd it with a stainless dish, which effectively means that they never go milky, they never corrode, and they're also much, much stronger than the aluminium. So when you're on the road and you've got potholes and so on, it's not a concern. I don't have to worry about bending wheels. I've got stainless hardware again, so that what's called I don't have to end up over polishing the car. As you can see, like, I'm someone who likes a dirty car, and really the last thing I like doing is actually washing cars. I enjoy making them dirty, not really washing them. So I want something that's easily serviceable, that works on the street, not just on the track. And so a stainless dish was the obvious choice. The centers I've done in a chromate paint finish. Yeah, it's just a little bit darker than the bodywork. It's not a pure silver, more of a gunmetal. And these wheels were built for me by a guy called Ellie from Voodoo Motorsport, and he is just the guy when it comes to customizing and rebuilding and refurbishing split rims. In fact, he does wheels for all the big companies. So, for example, I think he does a lot of F40 wheels. You know, the big Ferrari specialists go to him for their split wheels. He's got to be one of the best in the business, if not the best, certainly in the UK. What else? So yeah, so the wheels were custom built to the car. I'm running on the front a 225, which is a bit wider than standard. And on the rear, I'm running a 275. And actually, I think the rear is slightly over-tired, or the front is slightly under-tired. If I could go back, I'd put a set of 235s on the front, or I'd go down to a 265 on the rear, just because I think the balance isn't quite 100%. Of course, I'm running Michelin Pilot Sport 4s, which are kindly supplied by Michelin, who are a sponsor of the channel and legends. And they're just, again, because this is a street car, because this is a cruiser, I want the wheels to work in the real world, and I also want the tires to work in the real world. And these are a fantastic compromise. They're absolutely brilliant in the dry, and in the wet, they're really good as well. They're surprisingly very impressive. And really, the margin in between these and like a set of Michelin Cup 2s is pretty negligible on the road, I feel, whereas on the track it would all make sense. So again, built for purpose, wheels, tires, suspension. Yeah, so I've got the car sitting pretty down below. It does actually work at this height. I don't get any rubbing or anything else. It's probably slightly compromised, if I'm perfectly honest. I think that if it was a little bit higher, it would have a little bit less bump steer, and it would ride a little bit better. And that's something I'm going to revise later and probably bring it up a little bit, if I'm honest. I think I'm starting to get a little bit older and starting to perhaps appreciate a more reasonable ride height in terms of the quality of the ride. Or the performance of the ride as opposed to the quality of it, if that makes sense. I don't know. So calipers, I'm running big reds on the front, and I can't remember what I'm running on the rear. We've got cross-drilled rotors, which are perfectly fine for a road car. You'll end up with a bit of cracking in between the holes, but because this is a road car, I haven't gone for slotted discs. If I was building like a all-out track monster, that's what I would do. And I finished the calipers in the original Porsche color of Riviera Blue. You can see them more clearly on the front, actually. Riviera Blue, which is technically a 993 color, I believe. And the reason I chose that is because it's got the blue in it that reflects the blue hue that you get in the Polar Silver paintwork. So effectively, I think the two complement each other very well. And that's a theme that you'll see later in the car as well. Roll bars. I'm running H90 roll bars. Here's an interesting one. Porsche would send out their four-wheel drive 964s and their two-wheel drive 964s with exactly the same geo setups from the factory, which I think is nuts when you consider that, you know, four wheels are driven and it's a completely different drivetrain. So they often got the reputation for being quite understeery, the Carrera 4s, but in reality, if you do the right little tweaks just in geometry, all of that can be pretty much dialed out by the right person. And certainly if you start messing around with anti-roll bars like I have done on this car, then it becomes really completely negligible, non-existent. So this car was set up by Chris at Center Gravity, great guy. I'm sure a load of you guys have used him before, but he seems to be the go-to geo guy in the UK. And we've done H90 roll bars front and rear. The rear I've set up quite tight, and the front I've set up quite loosely to get that nose to tuck in. And whenever you get a problem with one axle, the trick is actually to start changing the settings on the opposite axle before you go to the axle that is actually problematic. So for example, if you've got understeer in a car, the temptation would be to loosen up the front anti-roll bar, but I would say actually where you really want to start is with the rear anti-roll bar, tighten that one up, see what effect that has, and then if that hasn't worked, then work on the actual axle that has got the problem. That's just how I do things. I'm sure there are a million different other ways of doing it, but it just happens to work for me. So yeah, so that's that. I think that's pretty much everything to do with like the oily bits, or the suspension stuff, the interesting stuff. So we can talk a little bit more aesthetically, I guess. Yeah, so if you come around to the front, one of the philosophies I have when I'm doing cars is also I want them to look period possible. So I tend to do things that would have looked correct in the time or could have been in time. So for example, you wouldn't see me personally, although I have nothing against other people doing it, running a carbon fiber bonnet with exposed carbon fiber, because it's not something that was period possible. So for me, I wouldn't do that. Each to their own, your car, your rules, this is just what applies to me. So I do period possible modifications. So for example, these are Tech Art ducts. So these were available in period, and what I like about them is you've got the air ducts, but you've also got the fog lights incorporated. So you really haven't got a compromise. Usually when on 964s, when you put air ducts, you have to do away with the fog light. So I think these are a nice compromise. I don't believe that Tech Art make these anymore, but I believe they're available from Design 911. They must have taken a splash mold off the originals, but I'm pretty sure they're available there. The other place to look at is probably FVD Brombeker in the States. They are actually in the States, but in Germany, although there you'll have your import tax. Interesting factoid, or it is to me anyway, I discovered that these are actually from a Mark III Golf. I'm sure a few of you VAG guys out there like me will recognize those straight away. My right one doesn't work because when I did the install and put the bumper back on and put the ducts in and everything else, I managed to get the wiring the wrong way around. So I've only got one of these working. So at some point or another, when I can be asked, I will pull off the bumper and do it and wire it the right way around. But anyway, those are my ducts. Same thing with the front splitter. So this front splitter is a Tech Art item. Again, I don't believe these are available anymore. But there are two versions. There's the wide body version and the narrow body version. They're a 3-piece splitter, and what I like about them is they use the original screws, so you're not having to do any bonding or any permanent damage as such to the bodywork. They can literally, you take off the original under trays which are under there, the 3 black pieces, and you replace them with these ones, and then it's done. The other plus side about them, aesthetically, I think they look very pleasing, but also I chose to do them in silver because what it does is it visually makes the car look lower than it is. If they were in black, you wouldn't see it and they'd disappear. So just aesthetically, I quite like having body-colored splitters. And on that front, what I would like to do, but I haven't done it yet, and I probably won't do it because then that's more of a permanent modification, is the lower sills on this car, as you can see, are black. I would like to paint them in the body color because again that'll visually make the car look lower than it actually is, and it was something that you will see on factory cars, so technically speaking it's something that was period possible, but again that's much more of a permanent modification, so I've been more hesitant to do it. Oh yeah, on the back, so I've got a 993 third brake light. So there were several different options that were available in period. You had the ones on the inside of the glass, but I didn't want to make modifications to the rear parcel shelf because again I want everything to be reversible. You had the basket cases, which are not to my personal taste, and they've certainly seemed to come out of vogue over the last, I don't know, decade or so. And I just like the 993 one. I think it's quite streamlined. It adds more of a spoiler to it as well, and it's quite useful having a third brake light nowadays, considering these cars are so small and so much lower to the ground than modern day cars for your visibility. One thing to note that if you do that change is you'll need the smaller wiper blade, because otherwise it'll hit every time. you activate the rear wiper blade. I think that's about it. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is while we're out here on the back, so the things that signify that this is an anniversary edition and not just a turbo look car is you've got your 911 30-year badge on the back here. You've also got it here on the inside behind the glass. And you can see this is number 476 of the supposed 911 that were produced. And on the inside, there's, I'll flip that round for you. On the inside, there's also a plaque on the other reverse of it, but what's interesting is it's spelt backwards, so that when you look in the rear view mirror, it's spelt the correct way. So if you have a quick look in there, Tom, you'll see what I mean. If you get real up close, you'll see that the 30-year symbol on that rear parcel shelf is actually spelt backwards. The last thing to signify that it's an anniversary edition is the top of the gear knob. You've got the silver there. So just nice little details, nice to have. Totally unessential, but just signify that this is an anniversary edition. All the anniversary editions came with a full leather interior, and you can tell that by the stitching here on the dashboard, on the knee roll, and a few other places. But essentially, it's a full leather interior. There's no vinyl in this car. So we've opened the door, so we might as well talk about the interior. So I've got the original seats on the shelf, but the original seats are heavy shelves. Heavy seats. So I wanted to put in something that was a little bit more lightweight, but what I didn't want to compromise on is the accessibility to the rear seats. I still wanted the car to be practical. So what I've done is I've gone for Recaro A8s, which are a period seat. So again, it's something that could have been period possible. So they've got decent lateral support, and they've certainly got support in the shoulders. You can see they're quite big there. These are a 90s seat, so again, perfectly period possible. I've trimmed them in black, quite simply, with black stitching, so that it matches all the rest of the interior. Same with the center cushions, kept that very OEM or OEM kind of look. We've got Recaro embossed here, again very subtly. I didn't decide to do that in any kind of embroidery, so it's nice and simple. And there were two versions of these seats, the Mark I and the Mark II. These are the Mark I, which I prefer because they've got body-coloured shells, or they've got plastic shells which you can paint body colour on the side, whereas the later ones don't have that, and actually they're a lot stronger because these can tend to crack if you sit in them incorrectly. So that's something to look out for if you're looking for Recaro A8s. And as you can see, I've finished them in Riviera Blue because I'm a tart, and that's what I've already done with the calipers. Yeah, door cards are all completely standard. Steering wheel. So this is actually a very Marmite steering wheel. People either love them or hate them, but this is my car, and these are my rules. So this is a Porsche design wheel that was designed by Porsche Design and made by Momo. And it's just a funky, weird looking, interesting wheel. And I just like it over the standard airbag one, which I also have on the shelf in case the next owner wants to put it back. What it does do is it brings the steering wheel a little bit closer to me as well, so that's a little bit nicer. And then, what else? And then if we look at it from this side of the car, I think we'll get a little bit more of a better view. I've also got in here the PCCM unit from Porsche. So I think this is the second generation from memory. There've been a few now, but essentially, what it means is that I've got full Apple. What have I done? Yeah, I've got full Apple CarPlay. So Spotify, Waze, Google Maps, all the different things that I want on a long car journey, since this is a cruiser. And it's just a nice thing to have. Again, you know, people always go on, oh, I just need the sound of an air-cooled engine. But when you're doing big distances, and I've done big distances with this car. This car's been to Italy with me, it's been to Switzerland with me, it's been to France with me, it's been to Germany with me. We've been all over the place. We must have done, I don't know, a good 10,000 miles together over the years or something. And I just, you know, I want to have Spotify. I want to be able to listen to some good podcasts, and I want to be able to listen to Led Zeppelin. So, so it is actually a useful thing to have. And what's quite cool is you can change the colors of the buttons here to like green, orange, or whatever color suits you. So I've chosen the yellow there. I think I've chosen the yellow there. Yeah, the yellow there, because the rest of the buttons inside the car are yellow, so it matches up really nicely. But yeah, it's just a cool little detail you can have. And then the kit actually also comes with different knobs that you can change out, which have more of a classic feel if you've got an older car with chrome switches and so on. So yeah, just a really cool thing to have. And then underneath you've got a little station where you can plug in 2 phones. You can have one charging and then the other one plugged into the unit. So effectively you're not fighting for USBs when you're on your journey with your favorite friend or missus. And an auxiliary input button there, switch there as well. So yeah, Bluetooth radio. These are really, really great units. I can't recommend them enough. And what I tend to do is I tend to have the thing plugged in, so it's working with Waze, and then I have the phone up here as well. And so I have up here, when you do that, what happens is you end up with a map on here, and then here you end up with just a list of the turns coming up ahead. And I found that really helpful for road trips. I like this because it just means it's just a Belkin little phone mount. I like it because it doesn't obstruct my vision inside the car, and it doesn't leave me with like, what do you call it, any suction cup marks, which drive me up the wall. And actually it stays put. I know it doesn't look like much, but actually it genuinely doesn't move. I mean, these phones are getting smaller and smaller, lighter and lighter, right? So actually it works quite well. Yeah, this is kind of an old friend to me. We've been together for quite a while and we've been on quite a few adventures. So I look at this car and all I see are loads of absolutely amazing memories with super awesome people and some really great adventures. And that's what really cars mean to me. You've probably heard me wax lyrical about that many times over the years, but really for me, these are tools to make memories and nothing else. They're 4 wheels and a steering wheel and some pedals, and they don't move without the squishy bit behind the wheel. So get in your car, get out there and just have a ride and make some great memories. I have no time, well, I have little time for cars that gather dust in the garage. Me personally, although I appreciate everyone's different. What else? I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I hope this video has been of some interest. I hope the car is of interest. I have a very, very sweet spot for 964s. I have a very, very sweet spot for 964s, me personally, because my first 911 was a 964. It was the underdog that nobody wanted. They suffered from oil leaks in the first year because they didn't have a head gasket. They suffered from dual mass flywheels in the first year because they failures. And they also only were available in the first year with 4-wheel drive. So they got a lot of bad press at the very beginning. And also there was a 90s recession. So that was a recipe for these values, for the values of these cars to absolutely plummet and nobody wanted them. So they were really the cheap 911 that nobody wanted. To me, I look at a 964 and I see a £7,000 car, and that's because the first 964 I bought, first Porsche I bought was a £7,000 964. That's the world that I lived in that time, and really the car that everybody wanted at that time was the 996, I believe. I can't recommend 964s enough. They're very special cars to me personally because one was my first 911, and also they drive particularly different to everything else that's out there. And you have to forgive me, there's a bit of rain going on. But the reason they drive different to all the 911s before and after is actually because these ones were the first available with coil suspension, but they did have the original single-arm rear trailing arms, whereas the later cars had multi-link rears, which completely transformed the way the cars went down the road. And the earlier cars were all torsion bars. So yeah, I've got a real sweet spot for 964s, and they really do drive in a unique way. And they're an absolutely awesome platform for modifications, which doesn't surprise me as to why so many of them are modified. That, and also the fact that they were so unloved, meant that you could modify them, you could track them, and break them and not have to worry about values. There used to be a bunch of like 30, 40 of us that used to gather together and do Spa every year. And it was like watching Skittles go up Eau Rouge. It was amazing, going down towards Eau Rouge. The days of seeing 964s on track are far and few between nowadays. But if you can get into one of these, understand that they really are awesome and they're really, really worth it. They're great cars. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. I hope that was interesting. Thanks for watching, and hopefully next time we'll have another guest who's a lot more interesting than I am. Okay, thanks.